Hello, thank you for joining us today.
Hello.
My name is Jennifer Gökmen.
And my name is Tübinet Yemez-Şimberg.
We're here to talk to you today about a very important book called The Divine Order in the Universe, which was brought into being by Dr. Bedri Ruhselman through a series of sessions with a medium in 1959, but only recently published in 2013. This book actually has got very important topics to explore on the nature of the physical universe and how it relates to spirit and matter. And because it's becoming more and more critical and more relevant, we'd like to take some time to discuss some of the details in the book. And today we're going to be discussing who is Dr. Bedri Ruhselman and what he accomplished in his life.
Yes, Dr. Bedri Ruhselman was born 1898 in Istanbul. And then after, because of his father's job, they were moving in Anatolia. So when he was 15, they were in Çanakkale. And he was really interested with spiritual work at that time, very much. And he was reading books. And one of the books he was reading at that time was Connection with the Other Beings. And the father was quite upset that he was quite interested with spirituality, but he was keep searching and reading. So one day, on front of his father and the relatives, he put one person in trance, and then he made a spiritual connection. So in that session, it was said that the First World War is coming. Mm-hmm. So, and his father took it serious, and he sent them to Istanbul back, and 1 year later the war started. Mm-hmm. One of the interesting things in his life, he wanted to join to the Çanakkale war in Gelibolu, and then he really wanted to die, and he wanted to go to the heaven. So he registered himself to the army to go to the war. But one of his friends said, "Oh, there is a fortune teller, and you can ask to this fortune teller." So he was quite enthusiastic to go and learn whether he will die in war and go to the heaven. So he went to the fortune teller. He was kept waiting and waiting. So then he was bored and he was just leaving. Then an old man came with a stick, and whenever that old man was into the room, he started to shout to Dr. Bedri Ruhselman, saying that, "Going to the heaven? Are you crazy? Go and finish your study." So it was kind of, he never mentioned anything to him, and etc. So it was a kind of sign for him that he continue his studying. So he told this to his uncle, and they were in a cafe and talking and what to do, because he was already registered to go to the war. So, and next to them there was a person listening. Then that person said, "You are quite young. We can find people who can die for this country and rescue the country, but we cannot find many doctors, educated people like you after the war to develop this country." So he said, "You continue your studying and you should not go to the war." So he gave his personal card, then wrote that delete this person from the list, and he put his name under it, and he was a Mustafa Kemal Atatürk. So he had a really interesting synchronity with Atatürk, so it obviously changed his life.
Even from a very young age, though, he was very interested in Neo-Spiritualism. It sort of sounds odd to think about in the 1910s and 1920s, a 9-year-old boy already being able to connect with mediums and have access to the spiritual world, but even from a very young age, Dr. Ruhselman had that natural ability, and that's something that he was able to develop throughout his life, throughout all the studies and travels that he did.
And he was a great musician, actually. So he was playing violin. So he got a scholarship at that time from a princess who was living in Istanbul. So he went to Prague for conservatory, and he was studying there. But somehow the economic situation of the princess was not so good, so he had to came back. But then he continued his work and writing the books, and he was doing a lot of psychic research and mediumship. He was not himself a medium, but he was putting people to trance, and he was using a special technique. So it was not like deep hypnosis. So during his communications, the person who connected with the spiritual realms and with the higher world could talk, and there was a kind of dialogue technique in his technique. And after he decided to finish the medicine school, and then he became a doctor. Then he was assigned to Afghanistan, so he worked there a couple of years, and he continued to write his book. Then when he was back to Istanbul 1950 with a couple of people around him who has the same interest, they established an association which is called Metapsychic Investigations and Scientific Research Association. So this association is still exists and functioning since then. And 1960s they also started to do a kind of magazine printing. It's called Spirit and Matter, and still this magazine also published every month. So it's the kind of longest spiritual magazine, even maybe the longest magazine in Turkey. It's all about the spirituality, parapsychology, and self-knowing, and different topics you can find in that book. When he was doing his studies, then he just kept himself away from the association a little bit, and he occurred in a private studying group. Then he started to work on this book. It took almost 1.5 years, so it was started 1958 and finished 1959. And
it was communicated through, again, through a medium.
Yes, there was
in
a
series
medium.
of sessions, and in fact, the medium who accessed the spiritual realm to give the information about this book is still alive in Istanbul.
And so after this communications was finished, the spiritual connection also gave a kind of how you say, do this in some instructions to them, saying that after the two of the custodians were died, then the third one who stays alive supposed to open the book.
And that was actually a very interesting time for us in the past 5 years, because when it got to the point where only one of the custodians was remaining, at that point, and that was actually the medium of the book who was the last of the 3 remaining, and he took the manuscript out of the safe and he took it to the association, and BİLYAY, which is a sister association with the original foundation that was started by Dr. Bedri Ruhselman.
And Metapsychic Research and Science Association was actually originally kept the book and was responsible, because medium brought the book to the association. So association, the book printed without any change. So this is really the original version.
As transcribed by the medium from the original information.
And after some times, of course, the language was quite difficult, so it was more daily Turkish.
That might be interesting for viewers to know that this book was written so long ago that some of the words that were retained from Ottoman Turkish are no longer in common use today. So even people who read the original version, who are quite literate in Turkish, still have a bit of a difficult time getting through it without the help of a dictionary, because the terminology is the words are quite different, not in common use anymore, but they're also incredibly specific words. So there is also a more modern Turkish version as well as other language versions, but of course we try to be very careful not to change meanings when the words are so precise.
Therefore also the book was translated to English after 1 year. So readers can find the book sometimes long sentences, but when we did the first edition, we kept the original. But there is now new version coming, and it will be much more daily English, and there will be some modifications, but we will keep the original sense. So yeah, it was interesting times, because many people knew about the book, many people were waiting, and 54 years these 3 custodians never told anything to anybody, so they were even didn't tell to their parents and etc. So just they did their duty. So when the book was opened, then the first time we could see that the name is the Divine Order and Universe.
It's interesting about the timing as well, the synchronicity that's involved, because a lot of the concepts that are found in this book that were relayed more than 50 years ago are concepts that we're finding becoming more and more popular in quantum physics, in modern spirituality, all of the hot topics that are on the cutting edge of how physics and spirituality interact with each other are already discussed in this book. However, because it's quite a complex subject, and it's described in the book in very meticulous detail, that makes it a bit complex to go through, and it's our intention to try to take the subject matter piece by piece and break it down and to make it more accessible to everybody to have this information.
Yes, in the book there are some new theories and new perspectives were mentioned, especially between the spirit, connection between the spirit and matter. So we have a new perspective about it. And also it's talk about the amorph material, how everything was created, and where we are coming from and where we are going to. And it's talk about the system of the dreams, mediumship, and it brings a new model of consciousness. And you can find a video also, we did a talk about it. So duality principle, also it's talk about time, and what else we can say. Also it talks about how the axis of the earth will be shifted, and it was predicted 54 years ago. And at that time there was no global warming or access or magnetic fields and etc. So it's really quite unique that that information was available in the book, available in that mediumship channeling.
In addition to that, there's also predictions, premonitions about what's going to be happening in the next 50 years, 100 years, what we're looking forward in terms of how our experience in this realm is going to be changing, and how we are going to be collectively evolving into the next era.
And also it's talking about a kind of planet coming towards our solar system, to the Milky Way, and it's also talking about the effects, how it will affect the Earth, so natural events will increase, but it's also talking about what is the meaning behind what's happening. And for the New Age people, they were all waiting the Golden Age and all this shifting in the spiritual development in this world, but also the book describes really what is going to expect it. And of course there will be a kind of shift to another reality, a higher reality, and the book is also talking about where we are going to do when we have spiritual development.
So you see, we have a lot of issues to discuss. We're going to be making a lot of different videos. We're trying to keep them as short as possible to make these digestible in short. So you can see there's a lot of material that we have to cover, and we want to do so in a series of short videos so that we can keep things very concise and explain things very clearly, topic by topic.
And stay connected with us. Thank you.